So Glass comes out tomorrow, which I'm very excited for. So I thought, hey, it's time for me to revisit the other two films in the franchise. So, at the end of Split, spoilers obviously, I think that's been spoiled enough by now if you've seen the Glass trailer or know pretty much anything about movies. Yeah, that was the big twist. Holy shit, David is back, and we're gonna get to see the continuation of a film from 19 freaking years ago now. Unbreakable is 19 years old. Wow, that's just wild. This is a film I've only seen once, and I saw it when it came out, so it's been almost 20 years since I saw the movie. Now, this was at a time when superhero movies were getting made, but they were still pretty lame for the most part. There was good ones here and there, but they were still in that place where no one thought they could be all that good, until Batman Begins and Iron Man and whatnot came out, and were kind of showing us like, oh wow, superhero movies can actually be like good films. How weird, you know. But this took the superhero idea and grounded it and made it more of a thinking man's movie. And this was Shyamalan's, follow up to The Sixth Sense, which, if you remember back then when The Sixth Sense came out, was a big, big deal. So even though that's not technically his first film, that was his first film that people acknowledged and knew about and got the critical attention. So his next film, his mainstream sophomore effort, was definitely a pressure. It was pressure. And I think he really nailed it. I don't know how much, praise this movie got back in the day. I remember a lot of people did like it, but like myself, because I was, only like 17, 17 when this came out. I was more into, like, when I went to this, I didn't really know what to expect. I had no idea what the movie was about, but I found it to be very slow. Very, very slow back then. I've grown up now, and I've come to appreciate films like this much more. So going into this, like I did last night, I was much more optimistic. I thought, like, okay, this is going to be much more my kind of film now. I'll get it more now this time. And man, I was right. This is a really damn good movie. I was very impressed by this. It is, as I already said, it's like a thinking man's superhero flick that's much more grounded in reality. Yeah, really, really good. It is slower paced, but I actually feel like the slower pace works very well for this flick, because it's a drama more so than anything. It doesn't have any action elements to it much, so this isn't a traditional superhero movie by any means. It's an origin story that is, very real. For the most part, there is one scene where I thought it was a little unrealistic. We'll get there. But all right, so spoilers obviously for this movie. Let's get talking. The stats that they show at the beginning of all the comic books that are sold, millions of copies and this and that, I'm curious on how that statistic stacks up to today, seeing as how so many things have went digital, and it's just a different time. So I'd be curious on if it's more or if it's less. I don't know. So Elias here, he is born and his body is all broken. We actually have the mother of my children. She has a little, not a niece, but like a cousin of sorts. And she was born with one of the rarer, because Elias says in this movie that I was born with like stage 1 or type 1, yeah. And that's like, not even the worst one. There's like 2, 3, 4, and the 4s don't live. And I supposedly she has it, and she's lived, because they usually die as babies. But she actually, I've met her. She's in a wheelchair, and I guess she's a rare case that she's actually survived longer than most do with that condition, which is just so damn sad. Jesus, man, his story in this is really, really sad. He's kind of never given a break throughout the whole damn movie. Unfortunately, he obviously goes in a much darker path than you would like to see. But I kind of felt for him, throughout the movie, just what he has to endure in his life and his search for trying to understand why the hell he has to be like this, that there has to be some form of a reason, and he finds it in comic books. So, all right. So we get David here, and he is on the train, and he goes and he sees this hot lady, and he takes his ring off, which is the dickhead move, and I felt like was a good way to set this up, because there's this little kid who's watching this whole thing, and she's it's the camera, it's panning back and forth between, which I actually really didn't like when I was a kid, when I was like 17 and watching this movie, but I actually really did like this time, because I feel like we're seeing the perspective of the kid who's kind of going back and forth, and he's supposed to be a superhero. He's supposed to be a role model for children, right? Like, that's the whole point of superheroes in comic books. They're role models for children. And this movie starts off with him doing something, not so great. He's clearly taking off his ring and hitting on this married woman and denying it and then throwing his ring back on. It's a terrible thing for a little girl to see. And so I just liked the contrast there of like where this is supposed to head with him being a superhero, and kind of how that's playing with the conventions of superheroes, and kind of flipping it on its head. He's not he's not this perfect person like most superheroes are. He has his flaws. All right. And I had no idea what this movie was about once upon a time when I saw this, so I didn't even know it was superhero-y until it got into it. And yeah, so he's on this train, it goes dark, and he's the sole survivor. He gets off, not a scratch on him. There's that great scene. There's such subtle things in this movie that I don't feel like people might have even noticed or didn't really appreciate, but that whole scene where he's talking with the doctor, and the doctor's like, in a moment here you're probably going to be the sole survivor, and you can just see, like, at the very bottom of the frame, the patient, while the doctors are working on him, like right in the center of its body, just starts to hemorrhage and bleed out right onto the dressing there. And it's just so subtle. That's what this movie has. It has a lot of subtle moments, and I thought it was just great. Just kind of leaves it for the audience to kind of fill it in. You don't see the train wreck. There's nothing over the top. Yeah, it's the budget thing, but also it plays well to the film. Very interesting shot selection throughout the whole film. The whole film is just like experimental shot selection for me. Not something you see a ton. And just that moment where he walks through the waiting area is just tense with emotion, because all these people are, even though he's a sole survivor and people should be like, oh my God, I'm so happy you survived. It's like, well, why you? Why you and you alone, and why are you unhurt? Like, at all, you have nothing, not even a scratch on your body. And you're walking out of here and everybody else's, family members, loved ones are dead. That moment, because his family is so excited to see him, his kid anyway, and he's supposed to be excited. And he just, how can you be? And yeah, the kid, another subtle shot, he like grabs their hands and he forces their hands together, because of course the kid wants his mom and his dad to be together, but that shows the strain on their relationship. You have the ring taken off, you have this, you have them sleeping in different rooms, you have all these great dramatic moments, but they're not like bashing you over the head with it. So very subtle stuff, and I really dig it. Of course, the doctor is suspicious of him being involved somehow, which I don't blame them. It's like, why are you untouched? But miracles happen. Some people just, they were in the right place in the right moment, and everyone died and they were okay. Now, not a scratch does seem very suspect. And I'm curious though, like, is his skin penetrable? I would expect it was. I don't want to overthink it too much though, but did the doctors try to stick a needle in him and did it break off? I don't know. Is his skin penetrable? Because if it is, then he can be stabbed and he can be injured. His only kryptonite seems to be the water, but as I said, not going to overthink it too much. He has the note on his car. How many days have you been sick? He goes in, he talks to them. They think he just wants a raise, but then he realizes, wow, I really never have been sick. Then we get a flashback, and Elias's mom is pushing him to get outside and not be a victim to his fear, and bribes him out of the house with comic books. I also like the use of purple with him, bright purple for a villain. It's like his color. It gives him a pop where the rest of the film is very drab and dreary. The villain is very boisterous, and I liked that. I like that about the character. He has like traditional villain-esque characteristics there with the colors. And I also love that she gives him the book, and the first comic he has, she's like, this one's supposed to have a surprise ending, which is foreshadowing the surprise ending, which you get in most M. Night movies. And the guy who comes into his shop, he takes his stuff very seriously. He has an art collection there, and this guy wants to buy it for his 4-year-old, and he's like, get the hell out of my place. This is not what you think it is. Then David comes in with his kid, and he talks to him, and he has these hieroglyphics behind him, and Elias compares comic books to hieroglyphics, and he essentially says that, these are stories that were passed down, but they've been sensationalized by comic books, that there's a basic fundamental realism to the stories, but they've been grossly exaggerated to sell, comics. I thought that was cool. At first, it's kind of eye-rolly, like, oh, really, we're getting into hieroglyphics and how these comics... But the way he says it, the way he explains it, and how it's been grossly exaggerated, I was like, yeah, okay, I could buy this. Like, there are superhuman people, but they kind of live in the shadows, and they might not even know they are. And that if someone like him can exist, then someone who's exactly the opposite of him. But his quest to find a reason for why he is the way he is what's so heartbreaking about this. And that whole end line, we'll get to that. Robin Wright, Jesus, she looks so young. She's so freaking attractive. She still is. But yeah, she wants to start again. That's a good moment. He goes and asks her, like, have I ever been sick? And she's like, can't remember. I can definitely see why people would think this is boring. I do, but it works so damn well for me. So Elias comes to his work, and he asks him, like, why did you pick, security? Of all the damn jobs you could ever do, you decided to pick security. And I thought that was great, because it is so well thought out by M. Night here, of like giving him a superhero cape of sorts, which also doubles as a protector towards his kryptonite, because he's afraid of water. He has a drowning incident when he's a kid. He almost dies. He doesn't, but he could have. That's the only thing that could hurt him. I don't know if it's a mental thing, but he does. He wears a rain slicker. It acts as a cape, but it also acts as a protectant. I thought that it was also well done, and it makes, it's what security guards wear at football stadiums like that. And the fact that he did choose a profession to protect people. It all makes perfect sense. So that's really, really good, well thought out writing there. Really dug that. The bench press scene is so damn dangerous, although it's a little eye rolling, because he tells his son, like, you can't do that to me. Like, you could hurt me, and then he just keeps looking forward and doesn't even look back to see if his son has taken anything off or at. It's stupid. It's like, really, you wouldn't look back to make sure he wasn't putting more on. But you could almost argue that he wanted to test his strength, so he didn't look back in hopes that his son would defy him. So I'm going to go with that to make it make sense. And he ends up bench pressing 350 pounds. Which, for a superhero, that doesn't seem like very much, but for this regular guy, it's a lot. I mean, there are people on this planet that can bench way more than that, and they're not superheroes. So it's not like it's this, oh my God, he bench pressed 1,000 pounds. He went under, but it's not like that. As I said, it's more subtle. It's more like an average dude like this who barely works out all that much should be able to bench 350. He's probably putting up 200 at best, 220, something like that, you know. And with him to be able to bench press way more than he already, that's everything he has in the house. That's not his limit. It's not like he's like, all right, that's as much as I possibly can do. So it's not saying that he couldn't do 1,000 pounds. But the film doesn't go to that exaggerated length. It's kind of like what Elias is talking about. We're not going to grossly over exaggerate his, his powers here. Like, he's grounded in semi-reality. So yeah, I thought that was really well done. The wife being a physical therapist as well, and having Elias come in to her. He somehow requested her. He has money, so he got to her somehow, which I think, yeah, he would have had. This isn't by the hospital. She's her own practitioner, so I think he could have hunted her down. So, but it's cool that they get to have those moments, and they're talking, and she just does not want anything to do with him later on. And then David starts to hone in, because once he starts to accept, and I think once he starts like accepting who he is, because that's what Elias is kind of talking to him about, like, you probably never knew. And I think once he starts to acknowledge his power, and he actually starts to hone in on it by working out and accepting that maybe he does have these powers. He already kind of had them, but was ignoring them as just intuition, which that's a great sequence between Elias and David when they're out there. He's saying, usually these characters have the ability to be invisible and fly and this and that, and maybe that was just exaggerated for something as easy or something as simple as just great intuition. And David has this ability to actually see into people's minds and what they've done in the past, people, their intentions and whatnot. And so he can see that guy when Elias chases after him to see if he really does have the gun, and this kind of proves to him that he has that mental ability. But that's also well done as well. I love the scene when he realizes, and he finally is like, all right, fuck it, I'm gonna do it, and he puts on the hood and he goes out there and he goes down and he just sticks his hands out just very lightly, just subtle. It's gonna be my word. And he just touches little people as they walk by. Not little people, but people a little bit when they walk by, just brushes them. And he can see that woman who stole the freaking necklace, and then he sees this guy who date rapes a girl. I mean, he has to see horrendous shit, but not something he can really act on now. This is stuff that has happened in the past. But he finally finds somebody who's doing something. So, I mean, I guess he just had his bar. It just so happened he seemed to be in the shittiest place in the country. There just so happened to be so many shitty people walking by him in that moment. But and yeah, it's coincidental he runs into a guy who has people tied up in their own house and killed somebody. But he does, and that's for the movie, and it works. I dig it. And the kid tries to be super at his school and gets his ass kicked, as he's like, well, I thought because I was your son, maybe I'd have your powers. I thought that was pretty good. But the one scene that I felt was pretty unrealistic just in the reactions was when the kid pulls the gun on him. I thought it was smart that David was like, okay, the bullet really is going to bounce off me. He's trying to like reverse psychology him and tell him like, I'm just going to leave. You're going to get what you want to know, that I'm like this, but I'm admitting to you, yes, it is, but put the gun. So he won't shoot him because he doesn't fully believe in that moment. But yeah, it's just like the way they react and the things they say, and the mom's just like, that's right. It just feels unrealistic. And then he puts the gun down, he grabs the gun, whatever, and then they all just kind of drop to the ground. And then the next day, like, they just get him a babysitter so they can go on a date. They didn't like take him to a therapist. They didn't get like, he just pulled a gun on you. Like, I don't know. The fact that they go on a date, which seems to be like the next day, and grabs a babysitter just seems so unbelievably unrealistic to me. The parents, me being a parent, if my kid pulled a gun on me and was going to pull the trigger, he loaded it, pulled back the hammer, holy shit. My kid would immediately be in therapy. I'd get rid of that gun. Oh my good God. And Then the comic book store scene I think is pretty funny when Elias goes in there and he's just broken and he goes and he smashes into the stuff and the guy's trying to take him out and then one falls in his lap and he picks it up and he puts it up and he's like, how much for this one? I thought that all was really funny. Love Samuel Jackson in this movie. He really is the best part of this movie. I like Bruce Willis as well, but it's just awesome. Then we get the flashback of the car accident that supposedly he was hurt in, but we know that he just faked the injury so he could be with the mom because she doesn't like football. She feels like it's the exact opposite of her profession, which the opposites, the parallels here in this movie are kind of brought up more and more. Like, Elias at the end is saying, you know how you can tell who the villain is because he's the exact opposite of the hero. And same thing with the wife. Like she's in a profession that is on the exact opposite end of the spectrum of football, and the way she describes it and this and that I feel like is also more credence to what Elias says later in the movie. And he even realizes he has some power there because during the accident he grabs the door and he yanks it and the whole thing bends and he rips the damn door off. And yeah, he said all of that. And then he goes in, he gets pushed into the pool, and the kids who he rescued, he gets saved by. So it's kind of like, saved by the kids he saved, which was cool. And then he goes in, he's in his cape, he jumps on the guy's back, and it's a vicious scene. It obviously wasn't Bruce Willis on that guy's back, but man, he is smashing him into the walls. There's so much indentation. That's like the action sequence of the movie, and I actually thought it was pretty cool. And I love the scene where he grabs his wife and he picks her up and he's like let go of that sadness. Like he finds his purpose in life because this is what he's supposed to have been doing this whole time. And he just picks her up like she's a feather and he's carrying her up in that shot. It's like done from his POV and she's looking up at him and she's kind of like almost overwhelmed by how strong he is, but also like so in love with him in that moment. And they're kind of rekindling that fire and he wakes up in the morning and all that emotion is gone from him. It's a great, beautiful sequence, and it's like everything in his life is being mended. Like he's finding his place again. And then Elias feels like his place has been found. So everyone has found their place at the end. Unfortunately, it sucks because David does say in the movie, like, he's my friend to his mom. Like, we're becoming friends. And so he actually does trust him. And you think this whole moment's wrapping up here. And the mom comes in and they go in the back. And then, boom, he touches him, a handshake. And, when he reaches the hand out, you're like, oh, shit. And then you realize that he's been responsible for all of these murders and that he's been studying this for years. And he wanted to quit. There is a scene in this that I thought was really interesting where when David's looking over at Elias, Samuel L. Jackson, he's in his wheelchair and right above his head in full frame, right before he's revealed to be who he is in this movie, Mr. Glass, he has a Nick Fury comic. Not just like anything, not just a shield. It does say shield, but it says Nick Fury and it has Nick Fury right on the front cover, right above his head. I thought that was really, really interesting. I was like, oh wow, talk about foreshadowing. And yeah, the whole line, like now that we know who you are, I know who I am. They call me Mr. Glass. Like that fucking sequence, the way he delivers that line, that whole moment, David's walking out. Oh my, it's so good. And it's like, you want to see a sequel to this. And this just gets you so excited for Glass. I want to see what has happened to Elias in this criminal, insane asylum or whatever for criminals. It's exciting. It's very exciting. I will watch Split tonight. I'm looking forward to talking about Glass tomorrow. I know a lot of critics are hating on it, but what the fuck do the critics know? But yeah, who's excited? Who's excited for Glass? I would usually see it tonight, but I'm going to go see it with somebody, so I'm waiting till tomorrow, but I get to watch Split tonight. I haven't seen it. I've only seen it once, so I haven't seen it since it came out yet again. I'm looking forward to revisiting that one. All right, adios.